Hello and welcome to today's session. My name's Maria Spies. I'm the co-CEO of HolonIQ, and I'm very happy to have Jonathan Louw here with me today. Jonathan is the CEO of Honoris United Universities. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Great. So today's session is it's close to my heart because I've been in higher education for a very long time. And Jonathan, you are the CEO of Honoris United Universities, which is a network of universities across Africa. You know, I mean, there's no secret that higher education is it continually goes through changes, but right now, over the last few years and going into the future, given that the world of work has changed so much and COVID and all sorts of other things, that higher education is really continuing to evolve. But you're not just any old university. You're a network of universities. So this is an innovation in the model itself. And so perhaps we could start today with, if you could give us a few minutes about a bit of background to Honoris, some more information about it, how it operates, how long it's been around, and just a bit of an overview.
Absolutely. So let me firstly say that Honoris is 5 years young, but its member institutions are many decades old. So certainly in terms of being around in Africa, we and our teams know the markets very well. Honoris United Universities itself is the first and largest Pan-African private higher education network that is committed to transforming lives through relevant education for lifetime success. And in fact, what I've just said is our mission statement. And at the center of that is collaborative intelligence, cultural agility, and mobile mindsets, which really embraces the approach to educate the next generation of leaders and professionals that we believe will be able to impact regionally in terms of Africa and, of course, in an increasingly globalized world. And Honoris combines the expertise of its member institutions that I mentioned earlier to develop world-class African human talent that is competitive in today's fast-paced, demanding, and now, as we see recently, increasingly digitized labor and startup markets. And if I just give you some facts and figures about Honoris, today we comprise about 72,500 students on more than 70 campuses, many learning centers via online. We're in 10 African countries. We're in 32 cities. So the network is formed predominantly of 15 key institutions, both multidisciplinary universities, specialized schools, technical and vocational institutes, contact, distance, and of course, online institutions. So we believe we're trying to reshape the future of learning to deliver on our education for impact mission by educating and preparing future leaders that we believe will be able to leapfrog any obstacles to achieve economic growth for their communities, and of course, through that, transform Africa. And we're doing this by creating sustainable academic models that reflect the pace of change in the various verticals, the various key verticals that we operate in, anything from medicine through science, through law, through business, IT, and therefore increase access to quality education that is primarily focused on employability with the potential to scale. So for us, access and quality are really critical factors in education. And we're using innovative approaches using technology that's bridging the gap. An example of this would be the recent collaboration with a world-class institution called Louw that does coding boot camps. We've launched 3 boot camps now in Morocco, Mauritius, and South Africa. We're planning a further 14 across Africa in the coming years. And of course, this furthers the provision of talent needed for the growth of coding across the globe, of which Africa, as we know, is no exception. Just look at the need for online payments and things that are really changing the economic landscape in Africa.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. I didn't actually realize the scope, 10 countries and 32 cities or something. That's pretty impressive. I mean, one of the things that higher education has always aimed for is access, but actually the model generally of higher education is elite, and that's not huge access. but it's hard to do because, universities are typically anchored in their geographic location. So a network of universities, can you explain? So universities can join the network. Universities that have been completely independent, like on their own for a long time. You said some of those universities are not, they've been around for decades, whereas Honoris Network has been around for 5 years. So universities that are established can join in the network. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely they can. And I think an important aspect of the sort of the network and how we leverage that is through partnerships. So we hold partnerships with all sorts of stakeholders in both the public and the private sector. And this ensures that the delivery of our higher education is in line with the needs of organizations that will look upon the talent needed for both school leavers and mature learners. So as I learned in medicine many years ago, common things occur commonly. And across the network of our institutions, certainly we look for those commonalities. And this, what we would call collaborative intelligence between these various institutions, provides widespread access to skills training and proven solutions from best practice across the various institutions that serve to impact what we would say the 8 most demanded skills required by employers today and for the future of work. So we really are focusing on, across these collaborative institutions, what the employer requires. And those 8 most demanded skills for employers include things like behavioral intelligence, critical and creative thinking, problem solving, good communication, collaboration, digital literacy, data analysis, and of course, entrepreneurship. And increasingly, when we've looked at some of the studies in Africa, we've seen that young students not only want to work, but they're highly, highly entrepreneurial. So if they had to make choices about, if you give a young person in Africa $100 today, what would they spend it on? Firstly, they'd spend it on something entrepreneurial that's going to make more money. And secondly, on education. So before all of the other wants and needs that one would imagine. So the collaborative network of institutions is really purposed around serving the needs of the population that we're out there to deliver a quality education for. So we look for that collaboration all the time.
I see. So the model itself of a network is innovative. So if we lift the hood a little bit inside the institutions or inside the network, I guess, do you deliver courses and in the traditional way, or do you focus more, like you talked about that partnership with Louw, which is a sort of a famous boot camp, and that speaks to rapid sort of style tech upskilling. So does your curriculum, is it traditional, bachelor's, master's, and so on? Do you have micro-credentials? Tell us about the sort of disciplines you teach in and the way you teach. Is that also different to a regular university?
Yeah, so I'd say some of it is bespoke, some of it is quite unique to Honoris, and I'll give you a few examples. But a lot of it is based on wonderful partnerships. We've got almost 190 partnerships with other academic institutions across Europe, across America, across the rest of the planet. And we do deliver, I think, traditional learning centers for school leavers in terms of engineering, IT, finance, business. We have medical schools, both undergraduate, postgraduate training. So all of the things you'd see in a traditional university as well. But as I was saying before, we really do place a very high premium or high importance on collaboration across this network. So if, for example, we have MC Engineering School in Morocco and we have Esprit Engineering School in Tunisia, you can be sure that we can leverage the learnings from one part of our network, in MC, for example, and deploy it to improve our curricula elsewhere, for example, in Esprit, and continually better that curricula and make it more tightly focused on those employers' needs that I'd mentioned before, which would therefore boost the employability of our students. A classic example of this would be that we recently held our 2nd annual academic summit, and this convened academic faculty and leadership from across all of our 15 institutions across all of the countries in Africa that we operate in. It was hosted over 2 days, and in this particular 2022 edition of this annual academic summit, we focused on the most pressing topics in higher education today, which we believed was around leveraging new technologies for student centricity, ensuring quality in higher education, and success and employability for 21st century graduates, and of course increasing the value of African research. There's just not enough research that happens in Africa at all. Our academic leaders certainly agreed that an education from a honoris institution is one that does focus on student outcomes, prepares the graduate for 21st century employment, and will therefore create meaningful impact in our communities across the continent. So these sort of forums of cross-pollination are what really bring the network alive.
Yes.
I'd mentioned that I'd sort of focus on some other sort of centers of excellence, if I call it that, some stuff that's, you said, look under the hood and let's see what's unique about Honoris. So we have a number of centers of excellence across the most employable sectors in Africa. So, for example, in health, the Medical Simulation Center that we have in Tunisia is one of only 8 centers of its kind to be accredited by the renowned Society for Simulation in Healthcare, the so-called SSIH. And you just have to go and visit it and see it to believe it. Just what the students can learn in terms of virtual reality when it comes to trying to resuscitate somebody that might have passed out in a driving accident or fallen over at work. So we don't just do this for medical students. We can train CPR to corporates, but it's done in a virtual simulation environment, and where also there's a post-audit, which is an amazing experience for students to see themselves in this virtual reality and learn from their experience, and therefore become better at, if it's CPR, for example, or delivering a child or whatever other kind of intravenous or other techniques that we might be employing as learning modules. In engineering and IT, as an example, we have state-of-the-art facilities in our various institutions. One is called the Smarty Lab at MC, and that's achieved more than 75 international awards and recognitions, alongside problem-based learning and artificial intelligence approaches at the sister school in Tunisia called Esprit. So again, this collaboration in these various labs really is quite bespoke and unique. And even in business, at Regent Business School in South Africa, we have something called the iLead Lab, which nurtures innovation and entrepreneurship, far more aligned to the opportunities of the fourth industrial revolution. So it takes our working adults out of the traditional classroom into a kind of a maker space that enables them to use 3D printing, use artificial intelligence, use virtual reality, build drones, and really kind of get into this whole fourth industrial revolution with a far more hands-on approach. So we've kind of nurtured that in Regent and then expanded it through the network into all of the other business schools that we have across the network. So that's just a couple of examples, sort of lifting the hood up, as you would call it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Sounds amazing. Do you also offer, just before we jump back out into the market level, do you offer on-campus, blended, online, in terms of the model? And also, can students at your network start in one country, in one university, and finish in another? Do you cross sort of students in different places, or?
Yeah, so certainly cross-pollination is something that we are driving as hard as we can. It starts, of course, with the faculty.
Yes.
So one needs to have the faculty exchanges, and that's why we have the academic summit that I had mentioned earlier. Cross-pollination with students is a little more challenging, primarily for economic reasons. Again, this is Africa, 52 countries, many languages, many different cultures. And although we're striving to seek harmonization across our various curricula, it's something that's not going to be built overnight.
Yeah.
But certainly these kind of partnerships, these kind of exchanges for students, for faculty, is something that's firmly on our agenda. And we are looking for the synergies across the group wherever we can. So one of the examples of that would be something we've called the 21st Century Skills Certificate. And that's a transversal program that embeds all of the key digital and soft skills required for the new world of work. And so far, since its launch just a very few years ago, 23,000 learners have enrolled into the certificate. An additional 100,000 students we project will enroll into that digital certificate over the course of the next couple of years. So that's an example where all of the institutions come together. But certainly your point about trying to improve this cross-fertilization is something that's firmly on our agenda and something that we will be addressing far more and more. And I think post-COVID, and now that we're all starting to get back on the road again and fly around, it's something that I think we really can kind of fast track. Whereas before with COVID, I think the whole world kind of went back into our sort of our localities and didn't venture out too much.
That's right. We hung out in our neighborhoods for a few years, and now we're, as you say, we're venturing out. I want to jump up into the market level because, Africa, I mean, as you said, there's many countries, many different dynamics, different economic differences and so on. But one thing that stands out, of course, about Africa is the size and growth of that population. And so we know that by 2050, Africa is the fastest growing continent on Earth with a massive youth bulge and so on. And all those kids need schooling. And as they grow up, they need continued education. So there's just such a huge number of people coming through the pipeline. And I'm interested in your thoughts on, how Africa, or combined the world, I guess, can help to educate such a huge population. What will models of old be able to cope with that scale required? What are your thoughts on the future market sort of opportunity, I guess, but challenges also?
Yeah. Look, it certainly does. And I think any IT executive will tell you that one of the benefits of COVID has been the fast tracking of digital transformation across so many institutions, countries, etc., and even industries. And I think this is certainly, I think, fast-tracked the sort of the Pan-African sort of idealism that companies like Honoris are trying to foster. But I think part of the challenge, and maybe the biggest challenge in Africa, is in fact the skills gap. So I think all of us know that there's a skills gap in Africa. And in some studies that we've seen, 50% of African employers state that job seekers' skills do not actually match their needs. And this skills match isn't necessarily absolute. It may be as simple as graduates from disciplines like marketing or business and law not having the skills to think beyond their home market, where many regional corporates might require them to think more globally. Or perhaps even, let's take the example of a newly recruited engineer, not having the soft skills to navigate complex cultural workspaces that might be unionized on one hand, or managed by a culturally distinct or different multinational parent on the other. So there's all these sort of, there's the absolute skills gap, and then there's this sort of more tacit one. And it's part of what we're trying to address in the curricula that we provide. But I think also, as the world's fastest growing youth demographic, and as you mentioned earlier, the future of the global workforce, we focus as Honoris on the opportunities that this presents, because as we know, by 2100, nearly half of the world's population below the age of 24 will be African. I mean, that's just a massive opportunity and a massive problem at the same time. So I certainly believe that Africa does have the chance to leapfrog traditional digital maturity. It has done so in many sectors. We're not beholden to cable or fiber networks under the ground. We can pivot very quickly to 5G or satellites or whatever else. And I think it's important for us, both as Honoris and as other institutions, to continue to focus on innovation to create bespoke approaches that take into account this sort of local context. And this means that reshaping the future of learning in higher education in Africa by creating some of those new academic models and providing a sort of a 21st century learning environment that gives students real world experience. And of course, that's very easy to say, but very difficult to do.
Yes.
And in many of our markets, as you'll find in developed markets, the traditional supplier of education at the tertiary level has been the public sector. And that's still the predominant provider of education on the African continent. But in most countries, the best public education institutions are not only free, but also high quality. However, there's only a very small percentage of the population that can benefit from this. The public sector in Africa, however, is oversubscribed by 3 to 5 times. And in addition to this, the bulk of public education in Africa is overcrowded, overfunded, with teachers that are not often fully engaged or well paid. And the culmination of all of this has been a tremendous displacement of the public sector by a growing private sector, by companies like Honoris. And I think that's a shift that you're seeing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I guess the demand, and you said it earlier about the choices that youth will make in terms of, you know, entrepreneurship and education. But I'm guessing that the demand for further learning, I won't call it education or higher education, because, you know, it's any sort of further learning is just huge. The demand is just so massive. And partly, I guess, it's the cost of education, the sort of providing access at scale at a low cost or free would be super important going forward as that youth population grows, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of those massive challenges. And that's why I guess we see in the market lots of, you know, alternate providers sort of popping up all over the place. But the demand is so huge, there's just room for everyone in a way, because the more people we educate in whatever way, the better. But that sort of leads me to a really important question, because learning and outcomes and impact, you know, how one goes from one thing to the next is super important. And so measuring impact and measuring outcomes has been sort of, it's a hot topic at the moment. A lot of people are talking about it, as they should be, of course. I mean, you're a traditional university, so I guess there's all different ways in which you measure outcomes. But I'm interested in sort of your approaches to that and the ways in which you think about outcomes and measuring impact and so on, whether it be, I mean, it's not just, you know, whether people pass the exam or not, of course, it's what happens after that. And that sometimes at the end of university, that's hard to do because people disappear off into their jobs and things like that. So tell us more about how you approach that.
Yeah, so certainly employability is the core part of that agenda. It's that mission statement that I mentioned, that relevant education for lifetime success, because we truly believe that in providing a relevant education, you unleash the potential not just of prospective students, but the impact on their families, on their society, and on Africa at large. So we really do pride ourselves in saying that 83% of our graduates are placed within 6 months of graduating. So, I mean, it's an amazing statistic. It's even higher, obviously, in the working adult cohort, which is a large portion of what we have in South Africa, where it's closer to 90%. So employability is obviously very key to the agenda. But you'll see in our sort of our purpose, our corporate purpose is really around education for impact. And we recently published, in fact, our inaugural impact report. Here it is, something we're really proud of. Please go and have a look at the website. It tells you everything you need to know. But it really does embody that commitment to ensuring rigorous reflection upon key metrics to ensure steady and sustained success across our network. So we show alignment basically in our contribution towards 11 of the 17 sustainable development goals. And in 2021, we actually worked towards calculating a precise impact score using a proprietary framework, which basically measured the positive societal and environmental impacts and enabled comparison across various sectors and various geographies. And this score, which was generated for the first time this year in 2022, when we published this particular report, demonstrated that Honoris delivered transformational progress, specifically in the areas of quality education, employment access, gender equality, and STEM education, which are just so critical for Africa's success. And a detailed breakdown of all of those can be seen in this lovely impact report that we're just so proud of. And if you look at our actual calculated impact, so far Honoris has transformed 770,000 lives across the continent. And we're on track to reach our target of 1.5 million by 2027. So we've actually got metrics around the kind of impact that we make.
That's fantastic. Wow. I've not seen an impact report from a university before. I'm sure others have them, but it's more and more important as time goes by. And, you know, for any organization or institution to start measuring this, because, you know, then everyone starts paying attention to it, of course. So, and it quantifies some of the things that you've been doing probably for a long time, but you do need to quantify it. So that's fantastic. Jonathan, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I've learned a lot more about Honoris and also a lot more about the market as well. And so, yeah, it's been wonderful. I know that the audience who are joining us for this summit will be very interested and possibly reach out to you. And yeah, thanks again for joining us today.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Great. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.